Mr. James, thank you so much for agreeing to give me your time today. For those people that don't realize, as well as being a business coach for other people, I also have a business coach myself. And I think this is one of the really important things, that everybody, whatever level they are, has some kind of mentor that helps them navigate through business. And wonderful Mr. Nick James is my business coach. I'd like to say exclusively, but of course, it's not exclusive at all. I'm one of many, many people that he helps, entrepreneurs in the world. Nick, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here, Deb.
What I think everybody would love to know is what kind of, because you don't just run a coaching business, helping business owners, you also run a massive events company. And did that come before the coaching, or did the coaching come before the events company?
It was kind of an evolution, really. So the first kind of business venture was actually essentially a small boutique marketing agency, you'd probably call it. So I would write sales letters and email campaigns and create marketing materials for clients. Then it became clear that I could provide them with the marketing materials, but they needed a bit of mentorship around how to drive traffic and how to sell and all of those things. So I started doing some mentorship. And once I got too busy doing that, I started running events.
And your event is Expert Empires, which probably in my industry, not too many people have come across just yet. Although I'm trying to help with that. I do tell everybody all about it. You have some incredible guest speakers. And in fact, everybody that's listening that knows about my Dance Business Conference, you have Mr. James to thank for that, because it was through attending Expert Empires, actually only last year, that it inspired me to create the Dance Business Conference in the UK, which is, now hopefully going to be a big part of the calendar for everyone in the dance industry for years to come. But it came from actually attending Nick's Expert Empires event. And so you attract guest speakers, which is the same format that I've followed. Some amazing people. Tell us about some of the people that you've had speaking at your events.
We've been very fortunate, very blessed to invite some amazing speakers. I don't know how many of them you or your audience will have heard of. But at the last event, we had an amazing lady called Marie Forleo, who came over from the US. She's international best-selling author. Her book that she's best known for was called Everything is Figure Outable. Great book. So Marie came for the last one. We've had people like Lisa Nichols, who was in The Secret, if you remember The Secret movie. As well as people like Gary Vaynerchuk and Grant Cardone. We had Lord Sugar once, who's probably the best known kind of mainstream celebrity speaker we've had, who, divides opinion, let's say. And more recently, Stephen Bartlett of Dragon's Den. So loads of others, too many to mention, but those are just a few.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, because I've learned a lot about you, having been to all the Expert Empires events since last year. And so I've kind of heard lots about your story, your background. And one of the things that kind of just utterly terrified me, especially, with me going into the event space myself now, was some of the financial bravery that you had to have in the beginning. Like, when you talk about the way that you managed to fund some of the speakers at your first ever event, that takes, how do you sum up the difference between being brave and taking a risk?
Well, look, I think anyone in business has taken a risk. Like, it doesn't, sometimes you don't feel like you have, especially when you compare it with other people. So maybe you're watching this, listening to this, and you go, well, I'm not taking risks. Look at Deb with the Dance Business Conference. And Deb, you're going, well, I'm not really taking risks. Look at what Nick's done with Expert Empires, but I'm doing the same. I'm going, well, I don't really take risks. Look at this person who's, playing an even bigger game. So I think when you think about risk, First of all, know that starting a business in the first place is a massive risk, because most businesses ultimately fail. And so, most people don't take the risk. Most people play safe their entire lives. So, if you've braved it and started a business, then, you have my utmost respect. I think early on, some of the risks, if you want to call it that I took, they didn't feel like massive risks to me, but they maybe looked like it to others. So let me explain. I ran my first ever event in 2009. Expert Empires started in 2017. So I had 8 years of running smaller workshops we had 8 people at our first one, which wasn't really a massive risk, because the expenses for an event of 8 people weren't massive. So I wasn't that financially exposed. And then, we gradually grew the numbers to 20, 30, 50, 100. I started running much bigger events in kind of 2014, 2015. And then when I started Expert Empires in 2017, I'd already got experience. So I already knew how the business worked. I knew how the finances of an event of that size worked. So even though it might have looked like a big risk from the outside, because I'd got experience and historical data to support my decision making, meant that even though there's always risk, of course, I don't think I felt there was as much risk as maybe that other people would have perceived I took.
I'm with you. Yeah. So you'd already got the audience, you'd got a database, you knew you were going to sell a certain amount of tickets. So it's all relative, I suppose, to where we are in business.
What I did, and I'll advise anyone to do this if you're weighing up, projects, decisions, investments, things like that, is I just do, and I still do it to this day, whenever I take on a new project, I just look at best case scenario and worst case scenario. And I want to look at both, because when I do best case scenario, that gets me all excited. And I think, when you go into a new project, you should go into it with a feeling of excitement. But then I also have to look at worst case scenario, and I have to make it okay. So on that first ever Expert Empires event, which, the expense of running that event was somewhere around £200,000, which I did not have at the time, hence why it looked like a big risk. I did my best case scenario and worst case scenario. My worst case scenario for that event, which was, I think, based on us selling, I think 400 or 500 tickets and only getting, a few small sponsors, and, getting modest sales results at the event itself. Like the worst case scenario, I was still going to make a small profit. And so I kind of justified it and went, well, even if the worst happens and I only make a small profit, it might not really be worth it for the amount of time and energy and resource and risk that I've taken to get this small amount of profit. But I believed, and I think this panned out to be true, I believed that the increased awareness of me and my business and my brand would be way more valuable down the line. And that did turn out to be the case. So, as soon as we ran that first event, it kind of put me and put us on the map, and then attracting other speakers in the future became a lot easier. Now, the good news is we did far better than our worst case scenario and turned quite a healthy profit from that first event. So even though it might have looked like a risk from the outside, it wasn't that risky. And I always weigh up best case scenario, worst case scenario before I make any decision that might be perceived to be a risk. Same with investments. I was literally just about an hour ago having a conversation with a client of mine who's considering an investment. And I just said to him, look, I've invested X amount of money in this. And look, it's performing really well. I'm getting a great return on the investment, but it was probably a relatively high risk investment. But my worst case scenario is I lose it all. And I was okay with that worst case scenario, because I go, I haven't invested so much in it that it would destroy me if it went to zero. So I think with anything like that, whether it's a new project in your business, whether it's starting a new business, whether it's making an investment, you have to weigh up best case scenario, worst case scenario and make your peace with the worst case scenario before you go ahead. Because then you can make the decision and go ahead completely all in, free of any limited or unresourceful thinking. You can just go all in and focus on the best case scenario and get excited about that.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that strategy of kind of going in confidently, knowing that whatever happens, you're still okay with it. Like none of us want sleepless nights, do we?
No, exactly. And look, I didn't want the worst case scenario to happen, but if it had, it wouldn't have been a complete disaster.
Yeah, I'm with you. Really interesting. And of course, one of the things, the thing that you are well known for now is being the person to go to in terms of strategy. Like you are a business strategist. Would you say that that is your biggest strength? Because obviously you've done a lot of different things, a lot of different trainings over the years. You've taught so many different elements of business. But do you think it's the strategy that you really like, that really excites you, that you think you're good at teaching others?
Yeah, I think it's probably the thing I'm best at teaching others, mainly because not many people teach that bit. So a lot of times, Deb, you know this, people teach like really specific tactics for starting a podcast, using Facebook ads in your local area to get more people into your dance school, whatever it might be. And all of those things are useful. And without a wider strategy to support those tactics, the results you get are pretty hit and miss. So, I think the biggest issue I hear from most business owners, most entrepreneurs, is that running their business is basically chaos and they're confused and overwhelmed. And if they've got staff or employees, they're even more confused and overwhelmed than the business owner. And so I guess the bit that I think I'm quite good at is teaching people how to create structure in their business. And part of that is having a strategy for the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. So what I excel at is creating that structure so that they can have more clarity and more certainty and more confidence. And of course, that then filters down to the team, the employees, the staff that you lead and that you employ in your business.
Yeah. And I think that, I'd 100% back you up on that in terms of, when I go through a little exercise when I onboard new clients and we identify their strengths and weakness and what the strategic plan needs to be going forward. And it's 9 times out of 10, the bit that's missing, the bit that's not happening is the planning, the structure and the strategy. Like they're great at doing all the things, but are kind of running around doing all the things with no real idea. And I don't know whether I've got this from you or your business partner, the wonderful Matt Elwell, who I've also been working with this year. But one of you uses the analogy of putting the sat nav in the car. Is that you or is that Matt?
That's probably more likely Matt, but go with it.
Okay. I'll tell you can pinch it. He talks about, you don't get in the car deciding to head to London and just drive willy-nilly hoping you're going to get there. Like you have a postcode and you put it in the sat nav, and then you know that if you follow that postcode, you're going to get to where you want to get to. And in business, I feel like most people are in their car just driving around. Like they don't actually have that plan and that map to get to where they want to get to. And that's really what strategy is all about, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think because most business owners are so busy, it's hard for them to justify the time to spend on planning the journey, I suppose, to continue that metaphor. And the way that I see that is, the way that I explain it is, it's a bit like sharpening the axe. Like if you need to chop down a tree, how much time are you going to spend actually trying to chop the tree down, and how much time are you going to spend sharpening the axe in the first place? And so doing the planning in your business is like sharpening the axe for 5 minutes before you go into doing the day-to-day work, in this case, trying to chop down the tree. And the idea, of course, and I think this is true in this metaphor and in reality in your business, is if you spend 5 minutes sharpening the axe, it might take you 15 minutes to chop the tree down. That's 20 minutes total. If you don't spend the 5 minutes sharpening the axe in the first place, it might take you 40 or 45 minutes to chop the tree down, or you might not be able to do it at all if the axe is really blunt.
Mm.
So I think it's really important that we spend that 5 minutes to sharpen the axe, or we spend that day every quarter in our business, or a couple of days every year in our business, sharpening the axe, doing the strategic planning so that we're more efficient, more effective day to day.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I mean, you might have just actually answered the next question, which is, what do you think is the number one reason why some people aren't successful in business?
Yeah, I haven't answered that question. The number one reason most people aren't successful in business is because of their lack of ability to manage their mental and emotional state. Ultimately, you cannot, the best laid plan, the best strategy I could possibly create or give you will not help you if you're not able to maintain resourcefulness, great, thoughts, and I guess, manage your emotions. Because there are going to be things with the best strategy, the best laid plans in the world. There are going to be things that derail you, that blindside you, that you weren't expecting. And when that happens, how resourceful or how able are you to manage your mental and emotional state? And the unfortunately, and I understand the reason, because no one ever teaches you how to do this. Now, I was really lucky in that I learned how to do this from a very young age. When I was 12 years of age, my mum was studying a lot of personal development and took me to a Tony Robbins seminar in Hawaii. And I spent most of my teenage years traveling all over the world studying personal development, self-improvement, NLP, essentially tools and techniques and strategies for managing your mental and emotional state. And so for me, that's the number one reason though. And when you as the business owner go into fear or, get got, like your patterns of behavior show up, whether that's anger, frustration, whether it's any other unresourceful feeling that you might experience. When you go there, you're in massive trouble. Firstly, because you're not able to make good decisions from that state or that place. And secondly, because especially if you're leading other people, if they turn to the person who's leading and that person has lost their mind, they got no certainty. And that's what people in your business, your team members, your employees need. They need certainty. And that will come from your ability to manage your mental and emotional state. So for me, that's the number one thing why most people don't succeed. Everything else is secondary.
Yeah. And everything else can be learnt, and everything else you can improve on and you can gain the knowledge on. So that's, they do say, don't they? Business is 80% mindset, 20% knowledge. I think it's even higher than that.
Yeah. I'd agree. And the good news is though, you're saying everything else can be learned. This can be learned as well. The problem is we seem to, and I think I understand why, we seem to place more value and more importance on learning, how do I do Facebook ads, or learning, how do I close sales, or how do I get, how do I increase retention in my school, or how do I get more people to turn up for taster sessions? And we get obsessed by these things, which are all important. I'm not dismissing those, but we spend so much time learning those. We don't spend the time learning the one thing that actually makes all of the things I just mentioned work better, which is how do you show up? How do you manage your mental and emotional state? How do you manage your energy day in, day out, even when, inevitably problems, issues, challenges turn up in your business?
And so this is probably a really impossible question to ask, but how does somebody manage their mental and emotional state?
Yeah, great question. Well, there are three things. And by the way, I learned this at 12 years of age. This is a long time ago. So 27 years ago now, I'm 40 next month. 27 years ago, I learned this for the first time. There are three things that will impact how you think and feel at any moment. The first one is your physiology. In other words, how you're using your physical body. Like, it's almost impossible to be in an unresourceful mental or emotional state when you're using your physical body in the right way. So when you're breathing a certain way, when you're sitting or standing a certain way, it's almost impossible to be in an unresourceful state. In fact, I would argue that most of the time when we're in an unresourceful state, it occurs because we physically tend to do certain things with our breathing, with our posture. There's loads of others. Even, hydration, nutrition, how much sleep you've had, all of these things are going to impact your ability to think clearly or to be in a good emotional state. Look, we've all, me included, we've all treated our bodies badly, where maybe we're sleep deprived, or we're dehydrated, maybe we've been eating or drinking things that we shouldn't have. And what happens? Like, mentally and emotionally, you're not in a good place, right?
Yeah.
So all of these things, your physiology, first and foremost, that's the one thing that's probably the easiest go-to place to influence your mental and emotional state. The second thing is the language you use. So the things you say, the words that come out of your mouth, but also the second part of that is the things you say to yourself in your head. And often the things we say to ourselves in our head, we would never say to another human being. We would never say those things that we say to ourselves about ourselves to our kids or our best friend or somebody we really care about. We'd never say those things. So the language we use both out of our mouths and what we say to ourselves in our heads makes a big impact. And then the third thing is just what you choose to focus on. Because at any given time, there are literally millions of things that you could choose to focus on. But generally speaking, when we're in an unresourceful mental or emotional state, we're focusing on the things that are going to cause us to feel in a bad way. So there are, like I said, right now, as you're watching this video on YouTube or listening to this podcast, there are millions of bits of information that you're taking in through your various different senses. But until I mentioned it, you weren't thinking about how your shoe feels on your right foot. And now you're acutely aware of how your shoe feels on your right foot, and you might not be wearing shoes. So you might feel this sense of freedom on your right foot, and you've not really appreciated that feeling, or how your sock feels, or how the ground feels underneath your foot if you're not wearing shoes or socks, or any of these things. That information was there, but you weren't focusing on it until I mentioned it. And the same thing is true when it comes to your mental and emotional state. At any given time, and look, this does not mean that I am not sympathetic to some people's current situations. I'm sure at any given time, we all have things in our lives, in our businesses that are not ideal, things that we would like to change, problems, issues, challenges that are unfortunate. I get that. But equally, we all, I'm saying 99.999% of the population have things that if we choose to focus on them will cause us to feel differently. Things that we could choose to be grateful for, or things that we could choose to be excited about. But when we're in a negative mental or emotional state, we're generally focusing on the things that aren't going well versus the things that are going well. And they all exist, just like the feeling of your shoe being on your right foot exists, or the feeling of, not having a shoe on your right foot currently exists. That being true, as is, there are plenty of things that you could choose to focus on that would cause your mental and emotional state to change. So there's three things. One, physiology, how you use your physical body. Two, the language you use, both in your mind and out your mouth. And then thirdly, just what you choose to focus on at any given time. And all three of those work in combination. So you change your physiology, it probably will have an impact on your language and your focus. If you change your focus, then it will probably impact the other two. If you change your language, it will impact the other two. But when you can use all three together, then it gives you the ultimate ability to choose how you feel at any given time.
So I thought I would just share with you guys today the planners that I have produced for dance school owners, because these are flying out of Amazon like hotcakes. And if you don't have yours yet, then all you have to do is pop to Amazon and type into the search Deborah Laws, and all 3 books will come up. So the ultimate dance business planner I designed for you so that you had a little bit of a Deborah on your desktop. The planners are full of business training, tips, motivational quotes, things to do at the start of the month, things to do at the end of the month, ways in which you can plan out your marketing and your retention, and they are selling all over the world. So go to Amazon, grab your #1 best-selling Ultimate Dance Business Planner and enjoy mapping out the growth for your studio. Fab. What an amazing answer. And I love actually the third one. I loved all of the answers, but in the third one in particular, just made me think of something yesterday that I had a wonderful client that has been doing really well, growing her school month in, month out. And then this month, she had a couple more leave than she had the month before. She had some new ones start, but a few more left than previously. So she didn't have quite the same results. So of course, now all the emphasis is on, I've had this dreadful month. I haven't got as many kids that have stayed, a couple more have left than have ever left before. And so this real downward spiral in terms of positivity. And actually, she'd still grown the business. Like the school had still grown, but the retention had just gone down slightly. But when I kind of pointed out, look, you've still growing your business, you're still going forward, you've still got momentum, but still we were focusing on the wrong thing. Yeah. So that's a good example, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think most of us in business, we tend to forget how far we've come.
Yeah. So
like that client of yours who's, got their dance school to a certain point, my guess is a year, 2 years, 3 years ago, whatever it was, like what she's built now was like beyond her wildest dreams, but she's forgotten that. And sometimes it's helpful for us to look back and really appreciate and see how far we've come. So, so we can tap into, that's a strategy for changing your focus. So we can tap into the state called gratitude, appreciation, celebration, whatever it might be.
Yeah. And I love that actually, because when I come up to you in Birmingham and we have our mastermind days, one of the first things you get us all to do is sit for 5 minutes and write down all the great stuff that's happened since we last met. And it does really make you look. And sometimes I do this with people and they kind of write 1 or 2 things. And I say, right, what else has happened? Oh, that's about it. Well, what else might have happened? And actually, when they keep digging, there's loads and loads of things. And I end up with a big list and I kind of go, oh, now you only want me to pick one thing, Nick, like I want to share loads of stuff. And you don't realize that there's loads of stuff, do you? Unless you take that time to really kind of look at it and evaluate.
Yeah. And the reason I do that at the start of every mastermind meeting is because I want to direct your focus in a certain place so you're in a more resourceful state so that you can contribute and get the most value from that meeting.
Yeah, which is lovely. I mean, I love doing it because, in all honesty, I probably don't do it any other time, which isn't good. I should be doing it all the time.
Well, we don't. Most people don't. How often do most people take time to really analyze and take stock of what's working, what's great in their business, in their life, what they're most grateful for? Most people never take the time to do that.
Yeah, no, I know. And I do think we should all do that a little bit more. I'd love to know if a business came to you that, let's face it, is a little bit broken, like they're in a bit of a mess. What would you look at first in order to help them at least take those first baby steps to getting out of the mess that they're in?
Well, I'll refer to my previous answer. The state of the person running the business would be number one. Second thing would be the vision for the future. because and this is a quote from my coach, the bigger and clearer the vision of tomorrow, the greater our ability to sustain the challenges of today. So if the business is a bit broken and, the owner is, feeling not so good about the current position, the bigger and clearer the vision of the future of tomorrow, the greater their ability to solve the problems of today, really, I guess is what we're saying. So I'd look at the vision. I guarantee there isn't one. I guarantee it. So we would look at setting that vision so we can then, because what most people do when things aren't going so well is they get desperate and they look at what can I do today to solve today's problem. And what I would suggest is you go, well, let's look at the vision for the future first, get clear on that, get excited about that, then look at what strategies should we be focusing on this quarter, this year, in order to move us towards it. And then we look at, right, what are the quick wins? What are the tasks, the activities, the things that need to be done here and now? But what everyone does is they go to the here and now first without the context of the vision and the strategies. And then the here and now sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. But either way, the success it brings is only short-lived. And then a day or a week or a month later, we're back in the same position, needing to scratch around to solve a problem again.
Yeah. It's that, I love this. It's that start with a vision and then deconstruct and work backwards.
Correct.
Yeah,
Exactly that.
Yeah. What, I have a question now. What would you tell your 20-year-old self that you need to know about business if you could go back and tell yourself that now?
What would I tell my 20-year-old self about business? Okay, so business specifically. Because what I would tell my 20-year-old self, I know this wasn't your question, Deb, but I'll answer it anyway. What I would tell my 20-year-old self is, first of all, at 20 years of age, I was at university. I was partying way too hard and not really taking anything in my life very seriously. So I'd give myself a good talking to about that. But equally, I think at 20, it's okay to enjoy yourself and not take life too seriously. Maybe not to the degree that I did, but still. But I think the big business lesson, what I didn't do when I started to get some success kind of in my mid-20s, what I didn't do is I didn't really focus on and reinvest in growth. I was very, it's been my greatest weakness throughout my career. I do think and operate from a very short-term focus. So I think that a long time is 3 months. That's right. A long time in my world. And I've always been like that. And that shows up in many different ways. So when I started to get some financial success, I was very much looking for instant gratification. So spending money on the nice things, when actually, if I'd have been a bit more sensible and reinvested in growth, by the way, when I say a bit more sensible, that doesn't mean not taking risks. I could have afforded to take bigger risks, which would have brought bigger rewards sooner if I'd not been looking for that instant gratification. So I think what I didn't do in my early to mid 20s was I wasn't playing the long game. I was playing I want the success and the rewards that come with it here and now. And actually, as I've got older, I've realized that actually life is actually quite long. I know cliche, life's short, and I agree with that to an extent, but equally I go, you don't need to have everything today. And I think I could have built a much bigger, more impactful, more meaningful business quicker if I'd not had that kind of short-term thinking and that need for instant gratification. So I'd basically tell myself to stop being such an idiot with money and wasting it all, and have more of a investment in the future mindset rather than and by the way, I'm not saying, put your money into long-term investments. That wasn't what I would advise myself to do. I'd advise myself to play the long game in your business and reinvest in future growth now.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And so with the same kind of question, what would you tell yourself 5 years ago that you now know?
Oh, good question. 5 years ago, so what, 2017? Yeah, I think probably then, I still couldn't quite comprehend where I was going to be now. So, like, even then, I was still probably thinking quite short term, and I was taking risks, which again, it's my kind of in my nature to do that. But I definitely was not that confident that it was all going to work out. Like, as in, I would love to be able to show myself 5 years ago, here's what happens in 2022. I'd love to have been able to show myself that, because I think if you'd have shown me that in 2017, I'd have been very, very happy, first and foremost. And it would have just took loads of pressure and a load of fear away.
But of course, if we knew what the future held, we'd take our foot off the pedal, wouldn't we? And then those things wouldn't happen. So it's just as well we don't know. But, talking about future then, where would you love to see yourself in 5 years' time that maybe you can't comprehend, going by your own quote, that you can't comprehend right now?
Yeah, well, the fact is, the thinking that got me to here is not the thinking that's going to get me where I want to be in 5 years. I know that. So there'll be a different mindset. There'll be a different there'll be strategies and tactics that we'll implement in our business that I don't even know about right now. It's funny because we always think that, like, at any time, we think that the problem we are in at the time is permanent, or we think that the thing that works right now is permanent. Like, I remember being at a conference, like, when would it have been? Probably 10 years ago. And I remember the guy on stage, amazing, very smart guy called Dan Kennedy. He was explaining how one day there will be a time where, like, Facebook doesn't exist. And everyone in the audience was like this, because he's quite, he is, let's say, certainly a lot older than me. And everyone was like, he's just being he's like a dinosaur, right? But actually, as time's progressed, I've seen how right he is. Because at the time, it was inconceivable that Facebook wouldn't exist one day. And by the way, some people might think right now it's inconceivable. I'm telling you, he's right. There'll be a time when Facebook doesn't exist. Why do you think they've now created this brand called Meta, where all these other companies sit beneath it? Because they know that one social media platform will not last forever. And so there'll need to be another one that picks up, like, the kids. In fact, I'm guessing a lot of the students that come through your dance school, if you're listening and watching this, are probably not on Facebook. So that means there'll be a time where it doesn't exist. So I guess where I'm going with this, I haven't forgotten the question, like, where do I see myself in 5 years? Like, you can't comprehend really what the future holds, because whatever's happening here and now feels like it's permanent, but I'm telling you it isn't. In the same way that Facebook is not permanent, the problem you're experiencing right now in your business is not permanent. The business model that I'm using right now is not permanent. It feels like it. It feels like it will never change. It will, because 10 years ago it felt like it was never going to change, and guess what? It did. One thing I do know, Deb, is I don't see a time in the future where events like Expert Empires won't exist in my business. And I don't really see a time where our core programs like Mastermind won't exist either. But what I do know from experience is that how we do those things probably will change over time. So when you ask me, where do I see myself, or what would I like to do in 5 years, I've got a high level overview of, I know where I want Expert Empires and our group of companies to go. I know some of the things that I would like to do and create personally, but I don't have like exact specificity, because whatever I say now will be wrong anyway, because who knows what the future holds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the big thing out of that message is just being able to adapt and change, isn't it? And, so many, and that goes back to the ability to, to manage your mental and health and emotional state, because the people that get scared about change and haven't got that growth mindset of evolving and changing with the times are the people that get left behind, aren't they?
Yeah, of course. And something you just said there sparked a thought in my mind, which is the mistake we make, and I probably didn't do a good job of explaining this earlier, is that when you ask me, how does one go about managing effectively their mental and emotional state, the answers I gave you were all things that you can control. But what most people do is, when it comes to how they think and how they feel at any time, they blame things that they can't control. So, like, I'm feeling angry right now because of something you just said. The problem with that statement is you can't control what somebody else says. So you're constantly going to be essentially on, you are not responsible and not in control of how you think and feel at any point, if you operate from that belief. Whereas if you operate from the belief of, look, I can control and influence how I think and feel at any time, and here's the 3 ways I do it: through physiology, through language, through what I focus on, then I'm good. Like, it gives you the power back. So I don't think I really made that point clear earlier, but I think it's a worthwhile point to make.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Thank you. I have got a few fun little questions to kind of start to wrap this up. I don't think that they're going to be like really quick answers, because some of them actually might need a bit more explanation. But are you good if I just...
Is that your nice way of saying, Nick, you're incapable of a short answer?
No, of course it's not. I know I say this because I say this to people, and I don't think anyone gives me quick answers. So I know it's probably not going to happen. Going on past interviews. Okay, you ready? Are we good to go?
Yeah.
Okay. Favorite business book?
Built to Sell by John Warrilow.
Fantastic. We'll go and add that to the Amazon cart. Favorite podcast?
Oh, tough. Currently, Stephen Bartlett, what's his podcast called? Diary of a CEO. That's my current favorite.
Okay. Favorite holiday destination?
Dubai, easy. Specifically, actually, you know what? Like, I've got a lot of great holiday destinations that I love, but specifically the Atlantis Resort of Dubai, mainly because it's my kids' favorite destination. They absolutely love it. My son, who's 9, my youngest son, I've got a son who's 13 as well. My youngest son, who's 9, he's constantly at me to take him there for his birthday. So it's his birthday in February, and he's like, "Can we go to the Atlantis for my birthday?" I'm like, "Mate, you're 9. You're about to be 10. Like, most kids just ask for like a new football kit or something. He wants to go to the Atlantis in Dubai for his birthday. But yeah, we love it there. It's great.
Fab. You are really famous for coming up with some great one-liners. So what is your favorite, not necessarily motivational line, but your favorite business saying?
You know what? I'm going to do my best, and forgive me. It's on the wall in my office, and it's a Tony Robbins quote. So I'm just going to read it off the wall.
Okay.
Most people overestimate what they can achieve in a year and underestimate what they can achieve in 2 or 3 decades.
I thought you were going to say on the end there, in a lifetime, but 2 or 3 decades is great. Love that. And I haven't heard you say that one. So that's a new one today.
It's been on the wall in my office for years, because it's a reminder to me, because I'm certainly guilty of this, like, because I'm naturally a short-term thinker. I would always, make massive goals and plans for like a year, but I wouldn't make plans for 10 years. And actually, what's panned out and what's been true for me is that I've been able to create bigger and better things than I ever imagined over a long period of time. But invariably, you know, I always historically and probably still am guilty of setting massive short-term goals that might be out of reach.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Next one. What is the one thing that you need to do to keep the family happy?
Oh, what's the one thing I need to do to keep the family happy? I think it's certainly football related. I'm a bit of a football fan. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see I've got the shirt collection on the wall in the office behind me. So it's a number of things, but also in the same banner. So going to my boys' football matches, like I said, they're 9 and 13, going to their matches regularly, and don't want to leave my wife out, taking them. We actually this year, for the first time since I was a kid, bought season tickets to go to Aston Villa, which is our team. We've got like the whole kind of corporate hospitality thing, and it's like, you know, amazing experience. And that's like our favorite thing to do together as a family. And so there's a lot more that I need to do to keep the family happy, but doing those things, I think, you know, kind of they're the things that we do together as a family regularly that we love.
Awesome. Awesome. And what about?
And by the way, and my wife
Genuinely loves football too.
Well, but I was going to say, and in addition to that, shoes and handbags.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's got to go with the football, just hand in hand. And what about to keep Nick happy?
To keep me happy, there's probably two things. One is just looking after my health and fitness and training, you know, regularly 5, 6, more recently it's been like 6, 7 times a week. So physically training my body keeps me happy for sure. And the second thing is just having downtime because I'm on the go so much. You know, and I think this is probably the case for most people that run a business. I'm sure dance schools are no different. But I'm on the go all the time. And so just having time to do nothing is really important. So my version of that is like sitting on the sofa on a Sunday afternoon and watching the football. And that's it. Like that is like my happy place. And that's like, I can forget about any problems or challenges that are going on in the business or people that need my attention. I can just zone out, and that's what I love to do.
Yeah. And what about the quality that you most dislike in people?
The quality that I most dislike in people. Is probably there's so many going around in my head.
You can have one.
Arrogance.
Yep.
Yeah. I think arrogance is probably the one that I dislike most. And the reason is because the quality that I find most endearing is humility.
Which answers the next question.
Oh, there you go.
Very good.
Sorry about that.
That's fine. Well, I only have one left then in that case. I think this is probably a nice one to wrap up on. Lying on your deathbed, looking back over your life, what is the legacy that you've left behind?
I think creating, well, our purpose for our business is we develop people. And I've been passionate about personal development since I was 12 years of age. And I think there's so many different ways that I like to bring that to the world, whether that's opportunities for people to join our team and be part of our company day in, day out and develop themselves and, you know, grow into their careers. Whether it's business owners that come to our events or clients like yourself, Deb, that work with us closely and benefit from the coaching and the mentorship we offer. yeah, for me, the legacy is that there are people that we're educating, training, inspiring right now who are creating businesses that are making an impact in loads of different areas. So like, I don't know the first thing about dance, trust me, but because of the training and the support and the coaching that we've given you, Deb, you're now making a difference to a load of dance schools. And those dance schools, this is where I get really kind of excited about it, about what we do. Those dance schools, I know, are making a big difference in the lives of people all over the country. Yeah. You know, like dance gives people most of the schools work with kids.
Yeah, well, majority. There's some that are just adults.
Yeah. But so like adults and kids, but thinking about kids in particular, I'm like, you know, if they're being bullied at school, if they're struggling academically, if there's all these problems and issues that are going on, gives them an escape. And I'm like, so indirectly, somehow I'm like many degrees of separation, like I'm contributing to that, which is cool. And I love that thought, the thought that the work that I do with you, Deb, has a ripple effect that's far greater than I could ever really measure or comprehend.
Yeah. And of course, everybody that works with you are from all walks of life, all different businesses, and therefore you're impacting so many lives in so many different ways. Like you said, that's incomprehensible, really, isn't it? What an amazing legacy. What an amazing legacy to be able to look back on. And thank you for everything that you've done for me in this past year and everything you're doing for everybody else. And of course, you know, if people want to come and experience Expert Empires, you've got a great lineup in March, haven't you?
We have. We've got the amazing Joe Wicks, who, if you're anything like me, was probably an ever-present on your TV screens during lockdown, teaching you and your family yoga and keeping you fit. And also Denise Duffield Thomas, amazing lady from Australia. She's coming over especially for Expert Empires to talk all about money mindset. So very excited about the next Expert Empires event in March.
Yeah. And of course, those of you that are listeners and have listened to many of the episodes that we've done so far, we actually had Denise on a podcast. So I'm very much looking forward to coming and seeing her in person on the stage because, big fan of Denise. Nick, thank you so much for your time, for being so generous with your time, for everything that you've done for me and that you do for everybody else. If people want to come and follow you, please check out the show notes so that they can come and join your Expert Empires or find out about all the wonderful work you do in the entrepreneur world. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Deb. It's been a pleasure.
Are you looking to get precious time back in your life so you can make more time doing the things you love? DanceBiz is a class management and booking software from the lovely folk at ThinkSmart that will automate and streamline all your dance school admin. It's the perfect tool for all those tasks that just seem to take so long and will help you to work smarter, not harder. Message me today, folks, and I can give you a code so you can get 2 months free.